Hello, my name is Andy Latham, and I want to welcome you to our course on handling variables, setup options, and data store constants within the Application Designer. Just as with the previous courses, there are a number of prerequisites. I hope that you've been through a number of the App Designer courses and are confident about navigating around the App Designer and building your own app. You should have a good working knowledge of VBScript. We'll be discussing concepts about variable handling and persistence, and you should have a good working knowledge of the Syspro customized panes and things like that as well. So in this course, what we're going to be doing, I'll just cover over an overview of App Designer and how it interacts with VBScript and how it handles variables generally. We'll build a demonstration of using all the variable callouts that are now built into App Designer, and hopefully that will show you the different ways of handling those variables. I want to introduce you to the new data store function, which allows us to store encrypted constants within Syspro and then use those constants in things like SQL connection strings and so on. So you might be having passwords and logins and things like that encrypted in there. We'll then go on to discuss how you get variables back into other Syspro programs, and we'll also discuss how you can call apps from standard programs and then on their return raising toolbar events and things like that. So quite a lot to cover, but hopefully this will help you design decent applications as you're going along. So let's move on now and have a look at the overview of the App Designer. It is important to understand that the key program that's running when you're using Syspro is Syspro itself. So when you launch an app, it's sitting in the Syspro environment. It understands and looks and feels like Syspro. And when you press a button to fire an event or do something on the user interface, what actually happens is that the program will say, I've got an event firing up. I need to check whether I need to run some VBScript. And if it does, it will launch a VBScript runtime on a different thread. It will run that VBScript for whatever you want it to do. And using the callouts, that VBScript can chatter back to the app designer that actually called it. However, one of the dilemmas of this is that once the VBScript has stopped running and finished and returns control back to the app designer, the VBScript runtime on that thread stops, and therefore any variable that you've set will disappear. So what actually happens then if you press another button and you rely on any data set within your first run of the VBScript, it won't be there because it launches a brand new VBScript runtime on a different thread and starts all over again. So what has to happen is there needs to be a mechanism within App Designer to be able to let the VBScript set variables which can be accessed at later runtimes, which we'll be looking at in a short while. Now, it's important to understand that this concept of how a variable or how long a variable exists is actually called persistence and scope. So what we'll find with the types of variable we'll be talking about, there are clearly the type of VBScript variables which you use the dim and the const functions to define, and those variables are available in the running VBScript at the time. So if you set a global variable within a VBScript, it's available to all your other functions within the VBScript. But remember, as soon as that VBScript stops, the value is lost. We have a series of different App Designer variables, which we will be looking at shortly. And then as well as those variables, Syspro itself, and we've seen them in previous courses, has a series of system-wide variables, which are things like company name and the operator and the SQL database name and all those bits and pieces. It's got 4 global variables, which you can set anywhere in your customized panes, and we'll see those later on. And clearly, for every single module, you've got a stack of setup options as well. And then finally, I briefly mentioned it earlier on, we have the new data store function, which I'll show you in a demonstration. So let's have a quick look at the types of variable we have in the App Designer. The first one and the easiest one probably is a runtime parameter, the ability to run an app and pass a single string parameter to your program, and it may have come from another VB script, or rather a customized pane. It may have come back from a command line prompt. It's up to you, but it is important that it is a single string. If you actually want to pass multiple variables on that call, then you might pass an XML string on there, or indeed a pipe delimited string or anything like that, and unpack it in your VB script. We've briefly mentioned the system-wide global variables that we've seen earlier on, and they're available both in the customized panes and App Designer. Now, as we come on to things like persistent variables, there were the old-fashioned, really, the global variables 1 to 4 in the system-wide variables, which are fine, but they're fairly limited. These have really been superseded by the ability to use a couple of call-outs for setting global and getting global variables. And those are the ones where your VB script is saying to Syspro, I want this variable available globally to any program or app that's going to be running after me. And then we've also got set variable and get variable, which is in effect saying a VB script saying, I am going to be setting an app level variable for another run of VB script to be able to get at that variable. And then finally, of course, you've got the variables you could keep in the form field, and form field could be hidden and therefore not visible to anybody, but still have data in it, or indeed it might have data and you may well enable or disable it so people can't actually edit it. So there's a different way of storing data on the form. Now with VB script variables, we've tended to think of dimensioning a variable and having it as a string, but clearly you can use create object and create things like the XML DOM for handling XML strings and all sorts of other classes and objects. The only way that you can save a variable within Syspro is as a string. Clearly, Syspro would not understand what a VB script DOM object was. So if you do have something like that, you must deserialize it, or serialize it rather, to a string, and then store it in a variable. To help us with our apps and for partners writing more generic applications, we'll see shortly how you get setup options for each module. And then, as I've said, we've got the data store constants, which we'll have a look at. So let's have a quick look at the simplest one first, which is the runtime command. Many of you will have used this, I'm sure, but you can run Syspro from a shortcut on a desktop or anywhere you like, give it a series of options, and clearly one of the options is a program to run. Well, that could be the app name there, and then the link would be your runtime variable that you're passing through. You could use the run program command, which we're seeing over here, and just simply type in the app name and the variable if you wanted to, or you could launch an app from a VB script in a customized pane or a macro on a standard program using the Syspro program to run, and then app name and the variable as well. So there are a variety of ways in which you can actually launch an app from anywhere in Syspro and pass it a parameter as you are running. And then within the app, you use the get app parameter call out to check whether there is a variable on the runtime as we go along. So, and that's relatively straightforward, and we'll see that shortly in the first demo. And I just wanted to remind you, when we talk about system-wide global variables, these are they, and there's stacks and stacks of them, and you see them under the variables tab when you're actually editing your VB script. So without further ado, let's go and have a bash at our demo. We're going to be building a little app which will show you different ways of handling the variables, and we'll have a go at that.